Hi, I'm Marci Kobayashi, and I'm back again with another excerpt from Finding Yoyu. If you've been following along, then you know that in the last excerpt I was sharing about how I spent time with my mother-in-law every day at the hospital. The truth is, though, I only spent about 30 minutes to an hour at most, and most of the time I was at home with my father-in-law. So I'm going to jump in with the next section about a little problem that we discovered. Otosan had horrible breath. It smelled like something had died in his mouth, and we couldn't stand it any longer. I finally asked Otosan if he had been brushing his teeth, and he insisted that he had. After breakfast, I could hear the water running. Indeed, it sounded like he was brushing something. Akira went to check, and sure enough, Otosan was brushing his teeth with great vigor. He rinsed his mouth and went back to his room. That's when we started to wonder when he had last cleaned his dentures. The cup he was supposed to use was dry. There were some denture cleaner tablets on the counter that Akira used for his one-tooth partial, but he couldn't tell if Otosan had used any. Akira called Otosan back into the bathroom to wash his dentures. After much resistance and a lot of yelling from Akira, Otosan finally removed the top one. It was disgusting. Then, he refused to remove the bottom partial. He insisted that it was permanent and even hinted that they were all his own teeth. To be fair, he did have 3 of his own teeth, but the rest was a partial, and it was removable. Akira stormed out of the bathroom. He grabbed his phone and called our dentist, whose office was only 2 blocks away. Akira knew it was a partial, but was concerned about forcing it out if it hadn't been removed in months. He didn't want to damage Otosan's few remaining teeth. After explaining the situation, the dentist agreed to see Otosan right away. They left on foot immediately and were back again within 30 minutes. Akira shared that when the dentist removed Otosan's bottom teeth, Otosan exclaimed, "This is a first! I never knew I had a bottom partial." Getting Otosan to clean his dentures was a chore. He would remember one day, but forget the next. If we let more than a day or 2 go by without checking, Otosan would forget again that his bottom partial could be removed. Knowing that it could be removed was empowering for us. As long as we insisted, he would eventually try and out it would pop. The trip to the dentist was just the beginning. We had no idea how long it had been since Otosan had had a full physical. At the very least, we had to get him set up with a new doctor because his blood pressure medication was about to run out. Like the dentist, our family doctor was only 2 blocks away, so we took him there next. Before we left Hiroshima, we had the foresight to ask Otosan's doctor to provide a basic letter of introduction. Other than high blood pressure, Otosan seemed to be in good health. There was some indication of a spot on his right lung, but it was inconclusive. His new doctor here in Tokyo looked over the one-page letter and decided to run a bunch of his own tests. He gave Otosan a new prescription for blood pressure and included antibiotics to help Otosan kick the cold he had come down with in late December. We were to return again the following week. On the day of Otosan's follow-up appointment, I got breakfast ready and was looking over my to-do list when Akira came in. He was already dressed and seemed to be in a hurry. I was shocked. I realized instantly that Akira had completely forgotten about the doctor appointment, or worse, remembered the appointment and assumed I would take Otosan there by myself. I was so mad. Friday was not one of Akira's regular university days. I had no issue with taking Otosan by myself, but I had already planned my day assuming that Akira would be taking him. We ate breakfast in silence, and Akira left soon after so he wouldn't be late for his faculty meeting. I stormed around for a few minutes, banging cupboards and slamming drawers. I was grateful for once that Otosan was hard of hearing. He was enjoying the TV, oblivious to my mood. I somehow finished washing the dishes without breaking anything and went and sat on the side of my bed. I was irritated and full of self-pity. I was having trouble containing my dark energy and didn't want to spew it out onto Otosan. Normally, I was an exceptionally happy person and chronically optimistic, so catching myself in a state of irritation and especially self-pity was uncomfortable. I usually tried to flip my perspective as quickly as possible and took pride in my ability to choose a new attitude. I leaned over, grabbed my deck of angel cards, and started shuffling. As I shuffled, I thought about my sister. She also had an innate ability to flow with whatever was presented, and like me, could quickly shift her perspective. We both felt it was a divine gift because some people couldn't shift and see the good in any situation. And yet, just the day before, we had been discussing how sometimes the ability to quickly shift perspective in the middle of a troubling situation could just maybe, on certain occasions, also be a coping mechanism, an attempt to avoid truly feeling the pain and anger of a given situation. Having just discussed this, I was caught frozen for a moment as I observed myself already beginning that shift from irritation back to a place of loving kindness. Though I wanted to feel good again as soon as possible and knew I could make it happen, I didn't want a repeat of this morning. I set the angel cards aside and allowed myself to feel the anger and looked my irritation in the face. I could see how Akira and I had taken each other for granted. I knew we would need to make some changes in the way we communicated our schedules. I was no longer irritated, but I didn't feel particularly good yet. I needed some alone time to re-energize. I told Otosan I would be back in a bit, grabbed my coat and computer, and headed out the door for a local coffee shop. A few minutes later, I was walking up the street parallel to the train tracks and was blinded by the morning sun. It was so bright that I could barely open my eyes. I was glad there were only a few other walkers because I had this crazy grin on my face. I wasn't sure if my eyes were full of tears because of the bright sun or because I was overwhelmed with emotion. As I walked, I realized I had been chanting, "Roof over head and food for my belly, roof over head and food for my belly." I realized with a giggle, my ability to switch perspective might not be a divine gift. It might just be years of growing up with my exceptionally self-disciplined mother. Her ability to cope with very uncomfortable situations in childhood led her to teach us how to never take any situation too seriously or personally. I couldn't count the number of times I had heard her ask, "Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have food for your belly?" Fortunately, I've always been able to answer yes, and in doing so, the severity of my problem was always diluted. I knew that Akira and I had some unfinished business to take care of regarding scheduling, expectations, and responsibilities. Even so, I felt relieved. I had a roof overhead and food for my belly. I could go on with the day from a place of genuine gratitude. I turned around and headed home. If I got right to it, I could finish everything on my to-do list before Otosan's appointment. And so I did. All right, that's all for today. I'll be back again next week with the next excerpt. Thanks for tuning in.